The bustling atmosphere of Heathrow Airport's Terminal 5 was a symphony of rolling luggage, announcements, and hurried conversations. Vanessa Reynolds, 62, checked her Cartier watch with a practiced flick of her wrist. Her silver blonde bob was immaculate, not a hair out of place despite the early hour. The first-class lounge had been satisfactory, but she was eager to board and settle in for the 11-hour flight to San Francisco. Final boarding call for British Airways Flight 287 to San Francisco. The announcement echoed through the terminal. Vanessa gathered her Hermes scarf and designer carry-on, making her way to the priority boarding lane. The gate attendant's smile faltered slightly at Vanessa's clipped tone as she handed over her boarding pass. "Good morning, Ms. Reynolds. Enjoy your flight in first class today." Vanessa didn't respond, merely taking back her documents with manicured fingers and proceeding down the jet bridge. 26 years as the executive director of Pinnacle Publishing had taught her that pleasantries were often wasted time. Efficiency was everything in her world. The flight attendant at the aircraft door greeted her warmly. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Reynolds. Let me show you to your seat in 2A. The first-class cabin was a haven of muted luxury, spacious seating pods arranged in a 1-2-1 configuration, each with direct aisle access. Vanessa settled into her window seat, immediately declining the offered champagne. "Sparkling water with lemon," she instructed, not looking up as she arranged her items in the generous storage compartments. "And I'll need a second pillow." As Vanessa organized her space, other first-class passengers filtered in. She paid them little attention, focused on retrieving her tablet to review the publishing proposals she planned to consider during the flight. The London Book Fair had been productive, with 3 promising new authors signed and a potential blockbuster memoir secured. The seat next to hers, 2B, remained empty as boarding continued. Vanessa silently hoped it would stay that way. An empty adjacent seat would make the journey far more pleasant. Her hopes were dashed when movement caught her eye. A tall black man in a tailored navy suit approached, checking his boarding pass against the seat numbers. Desmond Carter, 38, smiled warmly at her as he confirmed he had the correct seat. 2B, perfect. "Good morning." Vanessa offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, immediately returning her attention to her tablet. From her peripheral vision, she observed him stowing a leather messenger bag and settling in. She noticed his cufflinks, what appeared to be small, gold caduceus symbols, an expensive-looking watch. A business traveler, clearly, but something about his presence irked her. The flight attendant approached. "Good morning, Dr. Carter. Welcome aboard. Would you care for a pre-departure beverage?" "Coffee would be wonderful, thank you," he replied, his British accent refined and educated. "Black, no sugar." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. First class was usually filled with executives, celebrities, or the independently wealthy. Doctors rarely splurged on such luxury. Perhaps he was one of those social media doctors with inflated egos and sponsored content. As the final preparations for departure continued, Vanessa couldn't help but cast occasional glances toward her seat neighbor. He was reviewing medical journals on his tablet, occasionally making notes with what appeared to be a Mont Blanc pen. The aircraft doors closed, and the captain announced their imminent departure. As the safety demonstration began, Vanessa finally broke her silence. "Conference in San Francisco?" she asked, her tone suggesting casual conversation but carrying an undercurrent of assessment. Desmond looked up, a friendly smile crossing his features. "Actually, I'm giving a presentation at the Global Medical Innovation Summit. It's been in the planning for months." His British accent was tinged with something else, perhaps West African undertones. "How nice," Vanessa replied dismissively. "I'm sure the medical community appreciates having diverse speakers these days." The microaggression hung in the air between them. Desmond's smile faltered momentarily before he recovered. "I suppose they do," he replied evenly. "Though I'd like to think it was my research in neuroregeneration that secured the invitation." Vanessa felt a flicker of embarrassment but pushed it aside. "Of course. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise." The aircraft began to taxi, and Vanessa used the opportunity to end the conversation, turning slightly toward the window. The interaction left her feeling vaguely uncomfortable, which she attributed to her seatmate's perceived sensitivity. After takeoff, the first-class cabin settled into a quiet rhythm. Flight attendants moved efficiently, taking meal orders and distributing hot towels. Vanessa requested the seared salmon, while Desmond opted for the vegetarian option. As drinks were served, Vanessa noticed the particular deference the cabin crew showed Desmond. It seemed excessive even for first class. When one flight attendant asked him about last year's procedure, her curiosity got the better of her. "You seem quite popular with the crew," Vanessa observed, swirling her glass of Chablis. Desmond looked up from his notes. "I fly this route frequently." "Familiarity, I suppose." "Indeed. Though I fly this route monthly and don't receive quite the same attention." The implication in her tone was clear. A flash of annoyance crossed Desmond's face before he composed himself. "Perhaps you should try saving someone's life mid-flight. It tends to make an impression." A woman across the aisle, who had been subtly listening to their exchange, suddenly joined the conversation. "Oh my goodness, are you Dr. Carter?" The neurosurgeon. Her American accent was pronounced against the quiet hum of the aircraft. Desmond nodded politely, but didn't elaborate. The woman turned to her companion excitedly. "This is the doctor I was telling you about, the one who pioneered that revolutionary stroke procedure. It was all over the news last year." Vanessa felt a twinge of recognition. There had been substantial coverage of a British doctor who had developed a new emergency treatment protocol for strokes, but she hadn't paid much attention to the details. The woman continued, "My father's life was saved by your technique, Dr. Carter. His hospital in Boston implemented your protocol last spring." "I'm very glad to hear that," Desmond replied graciously. "The international adoption has been faster than we anticipated." Vanessa felt increasingly uncomfortable. She had made assumptions she would never admit were racially motivated, and now found herself seated next to someone of apparent significance in the medical field. The meal service provided a welcome distraction. As they ate, Vanessa attempted to reset the conversation. "Publishing executive," she offered without prompting. "Pinnacle Publishing. We specialize in nonfiction and academic texts. Perhaps your research might be suitable for one of our journals." "Thank you, but I already have publishing arrangements," Desmond replied coolly. Cambridge University Press has been very supportive. The gulf between them widened with each exchange. What began as Vanessa's quiet disdain was evolving into active tension. After their meal trays were cleared, Vanessa tried to focus on her work, but found herself distracted by Desmond's presence. When he excused himself to visit the lavatory, Vanessa found herself scanning his belongings with critical eyes. His messenger bag bore the logo of King's College Hospital. So he was legitimate, but something still bothered her. When Desmond returned, Vanessa had consumed a second glass of wine, lowering her inhibitions just enough to continue their strained conversation. "You know," she began, her tone falsely conversational, "first class used to have a certain exclusivity to it. Now it seems anyone can access it with the right credit card points." Desmond's jaw tightened. "Is there something specific you're trying to say, Ms. Reynolds?" "Not at all," she replied, though her expression suggested otherwise. "I just find it curious how accessible certain spaces have become." "Accessible to whom, exactly?" Desmond's voice remained measured, but his eyes had hardened. A nearby passenger glanced over, sensing the tension. "I simply mean that there was a time when first class was reserved for a certain caliber of traveler. Business leaders, diplomats, people who were accustomed to such surroundings." Desmond put down his tablet and turned to face her directly. "And you don't believe I meet that caliber?" "I didn't say that." Vanessa backpedaled slightly. "You didn't have to," Desmond replied. "Your implication was clear enough." Vanessa felt cornered. "Don't put words in my mouth. I was making an observation about changing standards, not about you specifically." "Were you?" Desmond's voice remained calm, but carried an edge. "Because it seems to me you made a judgment about my belonging in this cabin from the moment I sat down." Several passengers were now openly watching their exchange. Vanessa felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. "That's absurd," she hissed. "You're being overly sensitive." "Am I?" Desmond raised an eyebrow. "You've made multiple comments suggesting I don't belong here. Would you like me to enumerate them?" Vanessa's composure began to crack. "This is ridiculous. I was merely making conversation." "No," Desmond replied firmly. "You were making assumptions. Assumptions about my background, my qualifications, and my right to occupy this seat. And now that you've learned those assumptions might be incorrect, you're deflecting rather than reflecting." A flight attendant approached, having noticed the escalating situation. "Is everything all right here?" Before Desmond could respond, Vanessa snapped. "No, it is not. I'm being accused of prejudice simply for making conversation." The flight attendant, Zoe, A 31-year-old with a decade of experience handling difficult situations assessed the tension calmly. I'm sorry to hear that. Perhaps I can offer an alternative seating arrangement if you're uncomfortable, Ms. Reynolds. Why should I be the one to move? Vanessa demanded, her voice rising. I was sitting quietly, minding my business until I was subjected to these accusations. Several passengers had taken out their phones, subtly recording the interaction. Vanessa, too agitated to notice, continued her protestations. 15 years I've been flying first class on this route. 15 years. And I've never been treated with such disrespect. Desmond remained composed. Ms. Reynolds, I have not been disrespectful. I've simply asked you to consider the implications of your comments. What implications? That's just it. You people always see implications where none exist. A collective intake of breath sounded through the cabin at her words. Vanessa, realizing what she'd said, fell silent. Zoe spoke firmly. Ms. Reynolds, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. Dr. Carter is a valued passenger on our airline, as are you, but we cannot tolerate disruptive behavior or discriminatory language. Discriminatory? Vanessa sputtered. I said nothing of the sort. You people has certain connotations, Ms. Reynolds, Zoe replied evenly. Now, would you like me to find you alternative seating, or would you prefer to continue your journey here, respectfully? Faced with the realization that she was being perceived as the aggressor, Vanessa's indignation transformed into rigid dignity. I'll remain here, she said stiffly. There's no need for dramatic relocations. The misunderstanding has been addressed. Desmond said nothing, returning his attention to his tablet. The cabin gradually settled, though sidelong glances continued. Vanessa sat rigidly, staring straight ahead, acutely aware that her behavior had been observed and possibly recorded by the other passengers. As the flight continued over the Atlantic, the space between seats 2A and 2B expanded into an unbridgeable gulf of silence, filled only by the constant hum of the aircraft engines pushing them inexorably towards San Francisco, where consequences awaited that Vanessa couldn't begin to anticipate. The Fairmont San Francisco, a grand historic hotel perched atop Nob Hill, had always been Vanessa's preferred accommodation when visiting the city. This morning, however, its opulence offered little comfort as she nursed a throbbing headache, a combination of jet lag and the lingering effects of too much in-flight wine. Vanessa's suite overlooked the bay, the morning fog just beginning to lift and reveal glimpses of the Golden Gate Bridge. Under different circumstances, she might have appreciated the view. Instead, she paced the plush carpet, phone pressed her ear as she waited for her assistant to connect her to Pinnacle's legal department. Yes, Tiffany, I understand the time difference, she snapped, glancing at the ornate clock on the mantel. Just get Lawrence on the line. I need to be prepared if this incident gains traction. After disembarking from the flight the previous evening, Vanessa had been acutely aware of the sidelong glances from other passengers. One woman had pointedly stepped away when Vanessa stood next to her at baggage claim. The taxi driver had been unusually quiet during the ride to the hotel, repeatedly glancing at her in the rearview mirror as if trying to place her face. Ms. Reynolds. Tiffany's voice returned. Lawrence is unavailable until later this afternoon. He's in depositions all morning. Vanessa pinched the bridge of her nose. Fine. Have him call me the moment he's free. She ended the call and tossed her phone onto the king-size bed, then moved to the minibar to prepare a strong coffee. The Nespresso machine whirred to life, its familiar sound providing a small comfort in the midst of her growing unease. The television remote sat on the marble counter. Vanessa rarely indulged in morning news, most of it sensationalized drivel, but today she felt compelled to check if her in-flight altercation had attracted any attention. After all, several passengers had been recording with their phones. She remembered reading something about travel shaming videos going viral. She pressed the power button, and the large screen mounted on the wall illuminated. The local NBC affiliate was midway through its morning broadcast. Vanessa increased the volume and carried her coffee to the small dining table, where her laptop and meeting materials were arranged. And in health news, a revolutionary breakthrough in neurological medicine is being unveiled today at the Global Medical Innovation Summit, the anchor was saying. Vanessa paid little attention, opening her laptop to review her schedule. The Publishing Association's West Coast Conference would begin at noon, and she was slated to speak on a panel about the future of academic publishing at 2 o'clock. Dr. Desmond Carter, head of neurosurgery at King's College Hospital, London, will present his groundbreaking research on neuroregeneration after traumatic injury, research that some are calling the most significant advancement in the field in decades. Vanessa's head snapped up at the familiar name. On screen, the anchor's expression was animated with genuine interest. For those unfamiliar with Dr. Carter's work, he gained international recognition last year after developing an emergency protocol for stroke treatment that has since been adopted in hospitals worldwide. His team estimates the procedure has already saved over 12,000 lives globally. The screen changed to show footage of Desmond Carter, her seatmate from the flight, accepting an award at a formal ceremony. He looked distinguished in white tie attire, smiling graciously as he shook hands with a man Vanessa recognized as the British Minister of Health. Dr. Carter arrived in San Francisco yesterday, the anchor continued, ahead of his keynote address at the summit, which coincides with the publication of his research in the New England Journal of Medicine. Vanessa's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. A cold sensation of dread began creeping up her spine. And in an unusual twist to this story, the anchor added, leaning forward slightly, social media is buzzing this morning about an incident involving Dr. Carter on his flight from London. The screen changed again, and Vanessa gasped audibly. There she was, her face contorted with indignation, gesturing emphatically while Desmond Carter sat beside her, his expression a mask of dignified restraint. The footage was clearly taken by another passenger, slightly shaky but with audio clear enough to capture her damning words. You people always see implications where none exist. Footage posted online appears to show Dr. Carter being subjected to discriminatory comments from a fellow passenger in the first-class cabin, the anchor explained. The airline has issued a statement that they are investigating the incident. Do not tolerate discriminatory behavior of any kind. Vanessa's hand trembled so violently that coffee sloshed over the rim of her cup, staining the sleeve of her silk robe. She barely noticed. Dr. Carter has not commented on the video, which has been viewed over 2 million times since it was uploaded late last night. His representatives have asked for privacy as he prepares for today's presentation. The news segment shifted to weather, but Vanessa remained frozen in place, her mind racing. 2 million views. An investigation by the airline. And the man she had belittled wasn't just any doctor. He was a celebrated neurosurgeon unveiling major research at a prestigious summit. Her phone began to vibrate insistently on the bed. When she finally managed to move and retrieve it, the screen displayed a barrage of notifications, text messages, emails, missed calls. Most were from colleagues and business associates, but one name made her blood run cold. Hamilton Brooks, CEO of Pinnacle Publishing. With trembling fingers, she accepted the call. Hamilton, I can explain. Vanessa, his voice was unnervingly calm. Please tell me that's not you in the video that's currently trending on every social media platform. Hamilton, it's being taken completely out of context. That doctor was being overly sensitive, and I simply stopped talking. The sharpness in his tone silenced her immediately. The doctor you're referring to is Desmond Carter. Dr. Desmond Carter, whose groundbreaking research is being published by Cambridge University Press, our direct competitor. The same Dr. Carter who, coincidentally, is scheduled to meet with our science division tomorrow to discuss potential future publications. Vanessa felt the room spin slightly. What? No, that can't be. It is. Hamilton cut her off again. This was arranged weeks ago. His representatives reached out specifically because of our new neuroscience imprint. Catherine has been cultivating this relationship for months. Catherine Zhang was Pinnacle's rising star, recently promoted to head their expanding science division. She had been pushing for a more aggressive acquisition strategy for medical breakthroughs and had secured several high-profile authors in recent months. I didn't know, Vanessa whispered, sinking onto the edge of the bed. Clearly, Hamilton replied, his disappointment palpable even through the phone. The board is convening an emergency meeting in an hour. I suggest you use that time to prepare a statement. And Vanessa, make it good. Very good. The call ended, leaving Vanessa in stunned silence. Outside her window, the fog had lifted completely, revealing a city bathed in morning sunlight that seemed to mock her darkening situation. Her phone buzzed again, an email notification. With a sense of growing dread, she opened it to find a message from the conference organizers. Dear Ms. Reynolds, in light of recent events, we regret to inform you that your participation in today's panel discussion on ethical leadership in publishing has been postponed. We believe this allows all parties the opportunity to address current concerns before public engagement. Sincerely, the Publishing Association Conference Committee. Postponed. A euphemism for canceled. They weren't even attempting subtlety. Vanessa moved to the bathroom, bracing her hands against the marble countertop as she stared at her reflection. The polished, confident executive director of Pinnacle Publishing seemed to have vanished overnight, replaced by a woman whose face was now associated with bigotry on screens across the country. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications. She ignored it, instead turning on the shower and stepping under the scalding water as if it could wash away the past 24 hours. By the time she emerged, wrapped in the hotel's plush bathrobe, her phone displayed 17 missed calls and 32 new text messages. Among them was one from Catherine Jean. Dr. Carter's team just canceled tomorrow's meeting. Said they cannot in good conscience partner with a company whose leadership demonstrates such values. Vanessa, what the hell happened? Vanessa didn't reply. Instead, she opened her browser and typed Desmond Carter neurosurgeon into the search bar. Within seconds, she was staring at pages of results, each more impressive than the last. Dr. Desmond Carter, educated at Oxford and Johns Hopkins. Youngest ever head of neurosurgery at King's College Hospital. Recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Award for Medical Innovation. Led researcher on a groundbreaking study of neuroregeneration that promised to revolutionize treatment for spinal cord injuries and traumatic brain damage. And now, irrevocably linked to her in a viral video showcasing the worst moment of her professional life. A new email alert appeared from Lawrence and Legal. The subject line was blunt, damage control options. Vanessa opened it with resignation. Vanessa, I've reviewed the footage. From a legal standpoint, while your comments were inappropriate, they don't rise to the level of actionable discrimination in a technical sense. However, from a PR perspective, this is catastrophic. The board is discussing next steps. I strongly advise immediate public contrition. We're drafting a statement for your approval, emphasizing that your comments don't reflect Pinnacle's values and announcing your voluntary leave of absence while undergoing sensitivity training. Voluntary leave of absence. The euphemism wasn't lost on her. After 26 years at Pinnacle, she was being sidelined, perhaps permanently. Another text message arrived, this one from Hamilton. Board meeting concluded. Decision, 3-month leave, effective immediately. Press release going out at noon. Catherine will assume your responsibilities during your absence. Call me when you're ready to discuss terms. Vanessa felt a curious numbness spreading through her body. 3 months. She knew what that meant in corporate terms, a graceful exit strategy. Give the scandal time to fade, transition responsibilities, then quietly announce a retirement or pursuit of new opportunities. She dressed mechanically, selecting a charcoal gray suit that had always projected authority in difficult negotiations. Today, it felt like armor. The hotel room's phone rang, the front desk. Ms. Reynolds, there are several members of the press in the lobby asking for you. The manager wanted to know if you'd like to use the service elevator when you go out, so it had already reached that point. Reporters camped in the lobby, seeking comment on her spectacular fall from grace. Yes, she replied tonelessly. And please have a car brought around to the service entrance. Of course, Ms. Reynolds. Where would you like the driver to take you? Vanessa paused. Where indeed? The conference had effectively barred her. Her company had suspended her. Returning to her San Francisco apartment seemed premature. The press would likely find her there too. Then she remembered. The Global Medical Innovation Summit. Dr. Desmond Carter's keynote address. The Moscone Center, she told the desk clerk. I need to attend the medical summit happening there. If her career was imploding, she at least needed to understand fully the man whose path had crossed hers with such devastating consequences. Perhaps, if she could speak with him personally, explain herself, offer a genuine apology. The car will be ready in 15 minutes, Ms. Reynolds. Vanessa gathered her purse and a few essentials. On the television, which she had never turned off, a commercial ended and the news returned. The anchor's voice cut through her thoughts. Coming up after the break, more on the viral confrontation involving renowned neurosurgeon Dr. Desmond Carter, as the woman involved is identified as Vanessa Reynolds, executive director of Pinnacle Publishing. The company's stock has dropped 4 points since trading open this morning. Vanessa switched off the television with a sharp click. 4 points. Millions in market value evaporated because of her thoughtless comments. The board wouldn't forgive that, no matter how much sensitivity training she endured. Her phone buzzed yet again, a news alert from the Wall Street Journal. Breaking, Cambridge University Press announces expanded publishing deal with Dr. Desmond Carter, including exclusive rights to forthcoming research valued at estimated $25 million. $25 million. The deal that could have been pinnacles, should have been pinnacles, now firmly in the hands of their biggest competitor. Vanessa gathered her remaining dignity and moved toward the door. Whatever came next, she would face it directly. Beginning with a conversation with a man whose career was soaring while hers crashed spectacularly to earth. As she rode the service elevator down to the hotel's back entrance, Vanessa reflected on the cruel irony. After decades of evaluating others and finding them wanting, she had finally been judged herself. And the verdict was devastating. The car was waiting as promised, its tinted windows offering a shield from prying eyes. As Vanessa settled into the back seat, her phone lit up with yet another notification. BBC News alert. Dr. Desmond Carter to announce major expansion of neural regeneration trials, funded by £50 million grant from the European Commission. The piece was accompanied by a photograph of Desmond accepting the grant certificate from EU officials, his expression serious but hopeful, embodying the gravitas of someone whose work would change countless lives. Moscone Center, please, Vanessa instructed the driver, her voice barely audible. As the car pulled away from the hotel, she caught a glimpse of reporters gathered at the main entrance, cameras ready. They would be disappointed. Vanessa Reynolds, the publishing powerhouse, the woman who had built her career on impeccable judgment, had slipped away unseen. But invisibility, she was learning, was impossible in the digital age. Her mistake had been captured, shared, and magnified beyond her control. Now she was headed to face its consequences in the most public of forums, a confrontation that would either offer redemption or complete her professional destruction. The car merged into the morning traffic, carrying her inexorably toward the next chapter of a story she never intended to be part of. Outside the window, San Francisco continued its bustling routine, indifferent to the unraveling of one woman's carefully constructed life. The Moscone Center hummed with the energy of innovation and ambition. Medical professionals from around the world moved through the expansive convention space, their conversations creating a tapestry of accents and technical jargon. Digital displays showcased the latest advancements in medical technology, while pharmaceutical representatives distributed branded materials at elaborate booths. Vanessa's driver had managed to bring her to a side entrance, avoiding the small cluster of reporters who had caught wind of her destination. She stepped from the car into the California sunshine, straightening her suit jacket with trembling hands before approaching the entrance. "I need a ticket for the Global Medical Innovation Summit," she told the attendant at the registration desk, sliding her credit card across the counter before the young woman could respond. The attendant, whose name tag identified her as Aisha, tapped at her computer screen. "I'm sorry, but today's sessions are sold out." The keynote address by Dr. Carter was especially popular. Of course it was. Vanessa forced a smile. "I understand, but this is rather important. I'm willing to pay premium." Aisha's expression remained professionally sympathetic. "It's not a matter of price, ma'am. We literally have no more space. Fire regulations." Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "Listen, I don't need a seat. I'm happy to stand at the back. I just need to be in that room." Something in her tone, perhaps the edge of desperation, caused Aisha to look at her more closely. Recognition dawned in her eyes. You're that woman." From the plane, Vanessa felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "And that's precisely why I need to be in that session. I need to apologize to Dr. Carter." Aisha hesitated, then glanced around to ensure her supervisor wasn't nearby. "Look, I can't get you into the main hall. But," she lowered her voice, "there's a satellite viewing room where overflow attendees and press can watch the keynote on screens. I could get you access to that." Relief flooded through Vanessa. "That would be perfect. Thank you." Aisha quickly processed a pass, handing it across with a lanyard. "Overflow room C, 3rd floor." "And Ms. Reynolds," she added, reading the name from the credit card. "For what it's worth, I think it's good you're trying to make amends." Vanessa accepted the unexpected kindness with a nod, unable to form an adequate response. She clipped the pass to her jacket and made her way toward the elevators, keeping her head down to avoid being recognized. Overflow room C was already half filled with latecomers and media representatives when Vanessa slipped in. 3 large screens dominated the front wall, currently displaying the summit's logo and a countdown timer, 18 minutes until the keynote began. Vanessa selected a seat near the back, positioning herself where she could observe without being easily noticed. She pulled out her phone, which had been mercifully quiet during the drive. Now, however, a new barrage of notifications awaited. Among them was an email from Hamilton with the subject line "Press Release, Final." She opened it with a sense of foreboding. For immediate release. Pinnacle Publishing announces today that Executive Director Vanessa Reynolds will be taking a 3-month leave of absence, effective immediately. This decision follows an incident involving Ms. Reynolds that does not reflect the values of inclusion and respect that are fundamental to our company culture. At Pinnacle, we hold ourselves to the highest standards of professional conduct, said CEO Hamilton Brooks. We are committed to fostering an environment of respect and dignity for all people, regardless of background. We acknowledge that we have work to do, and we are taking immediate steps to reaffirm these values throughout our organization. During Ms. Reynolds' absence, Catherine Zhang, currently head of the Science Division, will assume Executive Director responsibilities. Pinnacle Publishing has initiated a comprehensive review of its diversity and inclusion practices and will be implementing enhanced training programs at all levels of the organization. The press release continued with corporate platitudes about commitment to growth and learning, but Vanessa couldn't bring herself to read further. 26 years of service, reduced to a sanitized announcement of her professional disgrace. A notification banner appeared at the top of her screen, text from Catherine. Vanessa, I'm so sorry about how this is playing out. I want you to know I didn't ask for this. If you want to talk, I'm here. Vanessa closed the message without responding. Catherine was talented and ambitious, exactly as Vanessa had been at her age. She didn't blame her for accepting the opportunity that had suddenly presented itself. In Catherine's position, Vanessa would have done the same. The room was filling quickly now. Vanessa noticed several people glancing in her direction, whispering to their companions. Word of her presence was spreading. She straightened her posture and kept her expression neutral, drawing on decades of boardroom experience to project composure she didn't feel. The screens flickered to life, showing the main hall where hundreds of attendees were taking their seats. The stage was arranged with a podium, a small table with water and a tablet, and several comfortable chairs for the panel discussion that would follow the keynote. A woman in a tailored burgundy suit approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the highlight of our summit. It is my distinct honor to introduce today's keynote speaker, a man whose work has already transformed emergency neurological care and who stands poised to revolutionize our understanding of neural regeneration. The audience in the main hall applauded enthusiastically. Dr. Desmond Carter is head of neurosurgery at King's College Hospital, London, a visiting professor at Johns Hopkins University, and lead researcher on the groundbreaking neural pathway regeneration project. His emergency stroke protocol, implemented worldwide last year, is estimated to have saved over 12,000 lives to date. More applause, accompanied by murmurs of appreciation. Today, Dr. Carter will be discussing his team's latest breakthrough in treating traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord damage, research that offers hope to millions of patients worldwide. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Desmond Carter. The audience rose in a standing ovation as Desmond walked onto the stage. He wore a perfectly tailored dark blue suit similar to the one he'd worn on the flight, his posture confident but not arrogant. He acknowledged the applause with a gracious nod before gesturing for everyone to be seated. Thank you for that warm welcome, he began, his British accent clear through the excellent audio system. Before I discuss our research, I'd like to acknowledge the extraordinary team at King's College who have made this work possible. As he spoke, Vanessa studied him with new eyes. On the plane, she had seen only what she expected to see, someone who didn't fit her narrow conception of first-class clientele. Now, watching him command the attention of hundreds of medical professionals, she recognized the quiet authority she had willfully ignored. Our journey began 5 years ago, Desmond continued, when we observed an anomaly in neural response patterns following traumatic injury. He proceeded to outline their research in terms accessible to the diverse audience, skillfully balancing technical detail with clear explanations. Vanessa, despite having no medical background, found herself captivated by both the content and his delivery. The implications are profound, he explained, gesturing to a complex diagram that appeared on the screens behind him. For patients with spinal cord injuries, our approach has demonstrated a 43% improvement in neural pathway restoration in clinical trials. For context, previous treatments have never exceeded 12%. The audience murmured in appreciation of the significance. But numbers tell only part of the story, Desmond continued, his tone shifting slightly. Behind every percentage point are real people, patients who have regained sensation, movement, and independence that conventional wisdom said was impossible. The screens changed to show a woman in her 30s, sitting in a wheelchair. "This is Eliza," Desmond said. 16 months ago, a car accident left her with a complete T10 spinal cord injury. Conventional prognosis, permanent paralysis below the waist. The video began to play, showing Eliza in a physical therapy room, supported by 2 therapists as she took tentative steps with the aid of specialized braces. After 8 months in our trial program, Eliza can now stand with minimal support and take assisted steps. More importantly, she has regained bladder control and partial sensation in her lower extremities, functions that dramatically improve quality of life. The video continued, showing Eliza smiling as she described how the treatment had changed her daily experience. Vanessa was transfixed. The man she had dismissively judged on the plane was literally helping people walk again. The contrast between his contributions to humanity and her own behavior was stark and humbling. For the next 40 minutes, Desmond detailed their research methodology, results, and future directions. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had devoted his life to meaningful work, yet maintained a humility that acknowledged the collaborative nature of scientific advancement. As he concluded his presentation, the audience once again rose in standing ovation. Desmond acknowledged the response with a gracious nod before taking a seat for the panel discussion portion of the session. The moderator, a distinguished neurologist from Stanford, opened with a provocative question. "Dr. Carter, your work challenges several long-held assumptions in neurological medicine. What resistance have you encountered from the established medical community?" Desmond considered the question thoughtfully. Healthy skepticism is the foundation of good science. Our findings required substantial verification before gaining acceptance, which is exactly as it should be. What's been most encouraging is how quickly resistance transformed into collaboration once the data became irrefutable. And speaking of collaboration, the moderator continued, "You just announced a significant publishing partnership with Cambridge University Press. Can you tell us about that decision?" Vanessa leaned forward, suddenly intensely interested in his answer. "Yes, we've expanded our existing relationship with Cambridge," Desmond confirmed. "They've been tremendous supporters of our work from the beginning, and their global distribution network ensures our research reaches practitioners worldwide, including in developing regions where access to cutting-edge medical information can be limited." He didn't mention Pinnacle Publishing or the canceled meeting. He was too professional for that. But Vanessa knew what might have been, a partnership that would have transformed Pinnacle's science division and cemented Catherine's vision for their future direction. The panel discussion continued for another hour, exploring the implications of the research for various medical specialties. Throughout, Desmond was articulate, insightful, and generous in acknowledging the contributions of others. Not once did he display the arrogance or inflexibility that often characterized those at the top of their fields. As the session concluded, attendees in the main hall crowded around the stage, eager for a moment of Desmond's attention. In the overflow room, people began to disperse, many heading down to the exhibition hall where demonstrations of new medical technologies were scheduled to begin. Vanessa remained seated, contemplating her next move. She had come to apologize to make amends somehow, but the logistics seemed impossible. Desmond was surrounded by admirers and colleagues. How could she possibly approach him without creating another scene? As she debated her options, a young man in a summit staff uniform approached her. "Ms. Reynolds." She tensed. "Yes, I've been asked to give you this." He handed her a folded note. Vanessa opened it with trepidation, finding a brief message in elegant handwriting. "Ms. Reynolds, I've been informed of your presence. If you wish to speak, I'll be in the green room S14 at 2:30. D. Carter." Vanessa checked her watch. It was 2:15. Somehow he knew she was here and was offering a private conversation. It was more consideration than she deserved. "Thank you," she told the young man. "Could you direct me to S14? He provided instructions to reach the secure area behind the main stage where speakers prepared for their presentations. Vanessa made her way there, her heart pounding with anxiety. What could she possibly say that would adequately address her behavior? The security guard at the entrance to the speaker's area checked her summit pass with a frown. "This doesn't grant access to this section. I have a meeting with Dr. Carter," Vanessa explained, showing him the note. "He's expecting me." The guard made a quick call to verify, then reluctantly waved her through. S14 is at the end of the hall on the right. Vanessa walked down the corridor, passing rooms where other speakers were preparing for their sessions. She paused outside S14, gathering her composure before knocking. "Come in," Desmond's voice called. She entered to find him alone, reviewing notes on his tablet. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Reynolds, please have a seat." Vanessa took the chair across from him, suddenly struggling to find her voice. The carefully prepared apology she had rehearsed in her head evaporated under his steady gaze. "Your presentation was remarkable," she began awkwardly. "What you're accomplishing is extraordinary." "Thank you," he replied, his tone neutral. "Though I don't believe you came to discuss spinal cord research." "No," Vanessa admitted. She took a deep breath. "Dr. Carter, I came to apologize for my behavior on the flight. It was inexcusable. I made assumptions, prejudiced assumptions, and I'm deeply ashamed." Desmond studied her for a moment. "May I ask you something, Ms. Reynolds?" "Of course. What exactly are you apologizing for? The public embarrassment? The damage to your career? Or the actual prejudice that informed your behavior?" The question struck at the heart of her discomfort. Vanessa had spent her career evaluating others, but rarely turned that critical eye inward. "All of it," she admitted quietly, "though I'm only beginning to understand the last part." She met his gaze directly. "I've never considered myself prejudiced. I have colleagues of all backgrounds. I've championed diversity initiatives at Pinnacle. Yet on that plane, I revealed something ugly in myself that I didn't know existed. Or perhaps refused to acknowledge." Desmond nodded slightly. "That's a more honest answer than I expected." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Vanessa broke it with a question that had been plaguing her. "How did you know I was here?" A small smile touched Desmond's lips. "Medical professionals are terrible gossips. Word reached me before I even took the stage." The smile faded. "I've also been briefed about the consequences you're facing professionally." "Yes? Well," Vanessa straightened in her chair. "Those are entirely deserved." "Perhaps," Desmond conceded, "though I take no satisfaction in your career difficulties. Contrary to what you might think, I didn't seek to have your meeting with Pinnacle canceled." Vanessa's surprise must have shown on her face. "My representatives made that decision when the video emerged," he explained. "They're understandably protective of my reputation and research." "I understand completely," Vanessa assured him. "In their position, I would have done the same." Another silence fell between them. Outside the room, they could hear the bustle of the summit continuing, footsteps hurrying past, fragments of conversations. "Dr. Carter," Vanessa began hesitantly, "I know an apology changes nothing. When I said how I acted, it can't be undone. But I want you to know that this experience has forced me to confront aspects of myself I never acknowledged." She swallowed hard. "That's not your responsibility, of course. You didn't ask to be the catalyst for my reckoning." Desmond considered her words carefully before responding. "Ms. Reynolds, I've spent my career studying how the brain creates new pathways after trauma. Neuroplasticity, the ability to form new connections, to rewire patterns of thought and behavior, isn't limited to physical recovery." He leaned forward slightly. "What matters isn't the mistake itself, but what pathways you build afterward." The metaphor wasn't lost on Vanessa. "I'm not entirely sure how to begin that process," she admitted. "Few people are," Desmond replied. "But acknowledgement is the essential first step." He glanced at his watch. "I have another session shortly. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss?" Vanessa hesitated. "The publishing deal with Cambridge, that could have been with Pinnacle, couldn't it?" "That's why we had arranged a meeting." Desmond nodded. "We were exploring options. Your company's new neuroscience imprint was promising, and Ms. Zhang's vision was compelling. The lost opportunity, one that would have been transformative for Pinnacle, weighed heavily on Vanessa. Not only had she damaged her own career, but she had cost her company a significant partnership. "I've cost Catherine, Ms. Zhang, a tremendous opportunity," Vanessa acknowledged. "Another consequence I have to accept." "Ms. Zhang is talented," Desmond observed. "From our preliminary conversations, I believe she has the vision to take your science division in important new directions." He paused. "Assuming she's given the resources and authority to do so." Vanessa recognized the implied question. "She will be. Hamilton, our CEO, recognizes her potential." "Good." Desmond stood, signaling the end of their conversation. Ms. Reynolds, I accepted this meeting because I believe in second chances. Not just in neural recovery, but in human behavior as well. Vanessa rose, extending her hand. Thank you for your graciousness, Dr. Carter. It's far more than I deserve. He shook her hand firmly. What we deserve and what we need are rarely the same thing. He collected his materials. I wish you well in your recovery process. With that, he left the room, leaving Vanessa alone with his parting metaphor. Recovery. Neural pathways. Second chances. She remained standing for several moments, processing the conversation. Dr. Carter had been neither vengeful nor condescending. He had treated her with a dignity she had failed to extend to him. The contrast was both humbling and instructive. Vanessa's phone vibrated in her pocket, another call from Hamilton. She let it go to voicemail. Whatever he needed to discuss could wait. She had more immediate concerns to address. She left the green room and made her way back through the convention center, no longer concerned about being recognized. The panels and exhibitions continued around her, medical professionals engaged in the work of advancing human knowledge and alleviating suffering. Outside, the afternoon sun illuminated the city with a clarity that seemed somehow significant. Vanessa declined the offer of her waiting driver, choosing instead to walk. She needed the time and space to think. 3 blocks from the Moscone Center, she passed a small bookstore with a display of new releases in the window. Among them was a memoir, Pathways, A Neurosurgeon's Journey Through Medicine and Meaning by Desmond Carter, MD. On impulse, Vanessa entered the store and purchased a copy. The cashier recognized her but said nothing, merely completing the transaction with professional courtesy. Back on the street, Vanessa opened the book to a random page and read, "The most profound lessons I've learned came not from success but from failure, from moments when my assumptions were proven wrong, when my certainty crumbled, when I was forced to rebuild my understanding from first principles. This is true in science and in life. Growth begins when we allow ourselves to be wrong." She closed the book, tucking it under her arm as she continued walking. Her 3-month leave of absence stretched before her, a professional purgatory that would likely end in forced retirement. Yet for the first time since the video had emerged, Vanessa felt something unexpected, possibility. The vibration of her phone interrupted her thoughts. This time, it wasn't Hamilton, but Catherine Zhang. "Catherine," she answered, her voice steady. "I'm glad you called." "Vanessa." Catherine sounded surprised that she had answered. "I wanted to check in. The situation is chaotic here. The PR team is in crisis mode, and Hamilton's trying to reassure major clients that this was an isolated incident." "I'm sure he is," Vanessa replied, finding herself unexpectedly detached from the corporate damage control. "Catherine, I want to apologize to you specifically. I cost you and the science division a significant opportunity with Dr. Carter." "We'll recover," Catherine assured her. "There are other researchers, other partnerships." "Yes, but this one was special." Vanessa paused at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. "Listen, I know this is premature, but when things settle, when I'm officially out and you're permanently in, I'd like to share some thoughts about the science division's direction. Not as your former boss, but as someone who recognizes your vision more clearly now than I did before." There was a moment of silence on the line. "I'd value that," Catherine finally replied. "And Vanessa, I'm sorry about how all this happened." "I'm not," Vanessa said, surprising herself with the realization. "Not anymore. What happened on that plane revealed something I needed to confront. The consequences are painful, but necessary." The light changed, and Vanessa crossed the street, heading toward a small park where she could sit and collect her thoughts. "That's remarkably philosophical of you," Catherine observed. "I've had an enlightening conversation with Dr. Carter," Vanessa explained. "He has a unique perspective on neural pathways." "You spoke with him?" "After everything. He's a remarkable person," Vanessa said simply. "Catherine, I need to go." "But I meant what I said. I like to talk about your vision for the division when the time is right." They ended the call, and Vanessa found an empty bench in the park. She opened Dr. Carter's book again, this time to the introduction. The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, forming a quadrillion connections. Each thought, each movement, each memory travels along pathways created through repetition and reinforcement. When injury severs these connections, recovery requires building new pathways, a process that demands intention, repetition, and time. What fascinates me most is not that this recovery is possible, but that the new pathways often create capabilities that didn't exist before. Patients who relearn speech after stroke sometimes develop linguistic abilities beyond their pre-injury state. Those who relearn movement after spinal trauma often discover new mind-body connections that enhance performance in unexpected ways. This is the miracle and the metaphor of neuroplasticity. Our greatest growth can emerge from our most devastating setbacks. Vanessa closed the book again, watching as people moved through the park, some hurrying, others strolling, each following their own path. For 26 years, she had moved along her own well-worn neural pathways of judgment, ambition, and efficiency. Now those connections had been severed, forcing her to build new ones. Her phone vibrated with a text from Hamilton. "Where are you? We need to finalize the transition plan. Lawyer's waiting." Vanessa didn't reply immediately. Instead, she reopened Dr. Carter's book and turned to the acknowledgments page, reading his gracious recognition of colleagues, mentors, patients, and family members who had contributed to his journey. Finally, she responded to Hamilton. "At South Park. We'll be at the office in 1 hour. I have some ideas about Catherine's transition that I'd like to discuss before meeting with legal." She sent the message, then stood and began walking toward Pinnacle's San Francisco office. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in decades, Vanessa Reynolds was open to possibility, to growth, to building new connections. As she walked, a new notification appeared on her phone, a news alert featuring a quote from Dr. Desmond Carter at a post-keynote press conference. "In science and in society, progress requires that we acknowledge our mistakes, learn from them, and move forward with greater wisdom. My research focuses on neural regeneration, but the principle applies universally. Redemption begins with recognition." Whether his statement was coincidental or intentional, Vanessa couldn't know. But its timing felt significant, a final message from the man whose path had crossed her so consequentially. She pocketed her phone and continued walking, each step a deliberate choice toward whatever came next. The path wasn't clear, but the first step was, and sometimes that was enough to begin building a new way forward. As she approached the Pinnacle Publishing Building, Vanessa noticed a group of journalists gathered at the entrance, likely awaiting comment on her situation. In the past, she would have avoided them or offered a carefully crafted non-statement. Today, she walked directly toward them, prepared to acknowledge her mistake openly and to speak honestly about the process of recognition and redemption that lay ahead. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But as Dr. Carter had written, growth begins when we allow ourselves to be wrong. And Vanessa Reynolds was finally ready to grow.